The galaxy had always viewed humanity as inconsequential, a minor species living on a fragile planet at the edge of unremarkable space, dismissed by the grand councils of interstellar civilizations and mocked for their slow technology and fragile biology. Yet no one outside Earth truly knew the depth of human ingenuity or the resilience honed over millennia of survival against their own harsh world. And so when the first fleet of the Triarch Dominion entered the Sol system with their ships, bristling with weapons designed to vaporize planets and annihilate civilizations, they expected a quick, painless conquest and a report that would amuse the high lords of their council, believing humans would surrender, hide, or beg for mercy. But what awaited them was not fear and capitulation, but the calm precision of human organization. As the leaders of Earth, a coalition of governments, scientists, and military strategists had long predicted such a confrontation and had spent decades preparing in secrecy, building ships unlike any other, integrating artificial intelligence that could calculate maneuvers faster than any alien brain, and developing weapons that harness the fundamental forces of nature in ways the Triarch had dismissed as impossible. And as the aliens approached, scanning for easy prey, humans activated their countermeasures, first with electromagnetic pulses that disabled the Dominion's long-range communication and navigation systems. Then with stealth, drones that infiltrated the enemy fleet, silently dismantling their shielding and feeding detailed tactical data back to human command, allowing Earth's fleet, hidden in the asteroid belts and using gravitational lensing to remain undetectable, to strike with surgical precision, annihilating the first wave of alien destroyers before they could even fire their primary cannons. And every subsequent assault only amplified the horror for the Triarch commanders who, until that moment, had believed themselves invincible, watching as battleships that dwarfed cities were torn apart, not by brute force alone, but by human strategy that anticipated every move, every formation, every possible counterattack, while the civilians of Earth, unaware of the scale of the conflict unfolding above them, carried on with their lives, a testament to humanity's ability to remain composed under pressure. And within weeks the Dominion realized that their fleets were being methodically destroyed, that every attack they launched or predicted and neutralized, that human engineers had repurposed captured alien technology to turn the Dominion's own weapons against them, creating a psychological as well as physical collapse. And as messages between alien fleets became desperate cries for retreat or surrender, the council members who had dismissed humanity convened in panic, unable to comprehend how a species they had deemed primitive could outthink, outmaneuver, and outgun them at every turn. And in this unfolding chaos, humans revealed the final component of their hidden strength, a network of quantum communication nodes linking every ship, every defense grid, every command center on Earth in orbit, allowing instantaneous coordination across the entire theater of war, a capability the Triarch had considered unattainable and illegal under the universal laws of warfare. And when the humans launched a synchronized offensive that targeted command ships, energy reservoirs, and production facilities simultaneously, the Dominion's hierarchy collapsed from within, their admirals cut off from their fleets, their soldiers unable to follow orders, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity, once thought to be insignificant, shattered the illusion of alien supremacy, proving that endurance, intelligence, and unity could overturn even the most formidable opposition, while the human leaders, standing on the bridge of the flagship horizon, watched the once proud alien fleets crumble, knowing that the universe would never again underestimate the species that had endured pestilence, war, famine, and extinction-level threats only to rise as an unstoppable force. And as the smoke of destroyed alien capital ships drifted across the void, the message from Earth was clear, not through words or threats, but through undeniable action. Humanity had revealed its hidden strength, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The remnants of the Triarch Dominion fled in disarray, their once formidable fleets shattered, their pride obliterated, and yet humanity did not pursue indiscriminately. They calculated each strike, each countermeasure with cold precision, understanding that their goal was not merely to destroy, but to assert dominance in a way that would ensure lasting peace and deterrence. And as human ships spread out from the Sol system, deploying cloaked observation units to key sectors of the galaxy, alien civilizations that had watched the initial battles from afar began to panic, sending envoys and emissaries to the council chambers, demanding answers and negotiating for alliances they had once scorned. But humans were patient, knowing that the revelation of their technological and strategic superiority would unfold naturally as scouts reported alien colonies preparing defenses, fearing that the same fate that had befallen the Dominion might reach them. And in the meantime, Earth scientists accelerated research on interstellar propulsion, energy amplification, and defensive systems, integrating lessons learned from combat, while military officers refined their strategies to anticipate not just known threats but potential future adversaries. And in every council of the galaxy, debates erupted over the meaning of humanity's rise, as some argued that Earth's resilience was a unique anomaly, a perfect storm of evolutionary adaptation, cultural cohesion, and technological genius, while others warned that ignoring or underestimating humans again could mean total annihilation. And as humans quietly observed these discussions, they prepared their next moves, ensuring that when diplomacy failed, their forces would act with the same efficiency and precision that had shattered the Triarch fleets, and within months, covert operations revealed secret plots by minor powers attempting to capitalize on perceived weakness among the remnants of the Dominion, only to encounter traps and countermeasures set by human tacticians who had anticipated every conceivable maneuver. And on Earth, the leaders coordinated with field commanders and intelligence analysts, balancing aggression with restraint, showing that human leadership excelled not just in technology, but in judgment. And when reports came in of alien societies collapsing from within due to fear, misinformation, and internal rebellion, triggered by humanity's calculated exposure to Dominion atrocities, the message was undeniable. Humans had not only defeated their immediate enemy, but had forced the galaxy to reassess the very definition of power. And as the horizon and its accompanying fleet moved silently between star systems, humans demonstrated unprecedented efficiency in colonization, resource acquisition, and fleet coordination, using their hidden infrastructure to sustain long-term operations without reliance on vulnerable supply lines, while alien analysts scrambled to understand how a single species, isolated for so long and dismissed for centuries, could orchestrate campaigns across hundreds of light years with such foresight, precision, and cohesion. And in the midst of these operations, the human forces revealed another layer of their hidden strength, the ability to integrate captured alien technology seamlessly into their own systems, creating hybrid vessels and weaponry that far surpassed anything in the Dominion armadas. And when minor skirmishes erupted, alien commanders quickly discovered that every tactic they attempted had already been anticipated, every offensive neutralized, every weakness exploited, leaving them demoralized and increasingly desperate. While on Earth, the population, though aware of the war's magnitude, continued to support their leaders with resilience and unity, proving that human strength was not merely in machines or strategy, but in an unwavering societal cohesion that inspired both soldiers and civilians alike. And as the galaxy slowly realized that humanity's hidden strength was multifaceted, encompassing intellect, adaptability, resilience, and unity, every empire that had once laughed at Earth now reconsidered its alliances, its ambitions, and its very perception of what it meant to survive in a universe where humans had proven that being underestimated was the deadliest mistake a civilization could make. And with each new encounter, humanity continued to reveal layers of capability, from advanced stealth operations and rapid tactical redeployments to psychological warfare that turned alien populations against their own leaders, until the cumulative effect of these operations left the galaxy in awe, recognizing that human supremacy was not an accident of circumstance, but the product of centuries of adaptation, planning, and hidden preparation. And as the horizon navigated through a field of shattered enemy vessels, its crew, calm and methodical, they understood that the war was far from over. Yet for the first time in recorded galactic history, humanity was not just fighting to survive. They were rewriting the rules of engagement for every civilization that had ever underestimated them. And the galaxy would have no choice but to acknowledge that the hidden strength of humans was now a defining force shaping the future of interstellar relations, commerce, warfare, and diplomacy, a force that would remain unpredictable, relentless, and unstoppable as long as humans retained the unity, ingenuity, and resolve that had brought them from a marginal world to the center of galactic attention. As the shock waves of humanity's rise rippled outward, the Galactic Council struggled to maintain cohesion. with delegates from dozens of species arguing behind closed chambers while human intelligence networks quietly intercepted transmissions, mapped political fractures, and identified emerging threats long before they could solidify. And while many alien governments attempted to present unified fronts of diplomacy, their internal records told a different story of fear, resentment, and disbelief that a species once categorized as expendable labor stock had not only survived but seized a strategic initiative across multiple sectors. And human leadership understood that this phase of the conflict was more dangerous than open war, because desperation bred reckless decisions. And so they expanded their presence carefully, establishing forward command zones near major hyperspace corridors, deploying adaptive defense platforms capable of reconfiguring in real time, and training fleet crews to operate independently if cut off, a doctrine born from humanity's long history of fighting without certainty or advantage. And in distant systems once controlled by the Triarch's dominion, human envoys arrived not with threats, but with evidence, releasing verified data of Dominion war crimes, resource exploitation, and systemic extermination policies, destabilizing entire regions as oppressed client species rose against their former masters. And while alien historians scrambled to rewrite narratives that had portrayed the Triarch as stabilizing forces, humans allowed the truth to spread organically, knowing that information, when precise and undeniable, could dismantle empires faster than fleets. And in parallel, human engineers unveiled the next evolution of their hidden strength, self-learning combat architectures embedded within ships and stations that adapted tactics based on enemy behavior, rendering repeated strategies useless within minutes. And when a coalition of mid-tier powers attempted a coordinated strike against a human supply nexus, believing it lightly defended, they encountered layered kill zones, decoy fleets, and counteroffensives launched from vectors that violated accepted models of spatial movement, leaving their commanders stunned as entire task groups were neutralized without a single human casualty. And as captured alien officers were questioned, many admitted the same fatal assumption, that humans would fight like everyone else, following established doctrines and predictable hierarchies, unaware that human warfare was shaped by centuries of asymmetric conflict, where improvisation, redundancy, and sacrifice were core principles rather than last resorts. And on Earth, the civilian population adapted seamlessly to the demands of a wartime economy, with industries shifting production overnight, research institutions coordinating directly with fleet command, and public support remaining steady not because of propaganda, but because humans understood the cost of failure, having lived through internal conflicts that taught them survival was never guaranteed. And as the galaxy observed this unity, a quiet fear took root that humanity's greatest strength was not any single weapon or strategy, but the ability to function as a coherent whole under pressure. And when alien analysts attempted to predict future human actions, they found their models failing repeatedly because humans did not optimize for immediate victory alone, but for long-term dominance, accepting short-term restraint to secure irreversible advantages later. And this philosophy became evident when humans deliberately halted advances near certain borders, allowing rival powers to exhaust themselves through infighting and resource depletion before stepping in as stabilizing forces, reshaping political landscapes without firing a shot. And as months turned into years, the phrase hidden strength became synonymous across the galaxy, not with secret weapons, but with the depth of human preparation, the layers of contingency planning, and the refusal to rely on a single point of failure. And when the first Joint Council formally acknowledged humanity as a major power, granting them veto authority and strategic oversight roles previously reserved for ancient empires, the human representatives accepted without celebration, fully aware that recognition was merely another battlefield. And as they returned to their ships, receiving reports of new threats forming beyond explored space, they did not express alarm, only readiness, because humanity had long understood that supremacy was not claimed once but maintained continuously through vigilance, adaptability, and the willingness to confront the unknown head-on. And as the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, it became increasingly clear that alien supremacy had not been overthrown by a sudden miracle or singular revelation, but by a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for the day when survival would demand everything it had learned. And in that understanding, many civilizations quietly admitted a truth they could no longer deny, that humanity had not revealed its hidden strength all at once. It had merely begun to stop hiding it, With humanity's presence now firmly embedded across multiple strategic regions, the balance of power within the galaxy entered a fragile and volatile phase, as ancient empires that had ruled unchallenged for millennia faced a reality that their doctrines, technologies, and political structures were no longer sufficient. And while some attempted rapid reform, others doubled down on arrogance, believing that human success had been exaggerated or reliant on circumstance rather than capability. A belief that would soon prove catastrophic, because human intelligence divisions had already mapped these factions in exhaustive detail, identify which leaders could be reasoned with and which would only respond to decisive force. And as diplomatic channels expanded, human ambassadors traveled to worlds that had never before hosted off-world negotiators, listening more than speaking, gathering cultural, economic, and psychological data that would later shape tailored engagement strategies. And, in contrast, human fleets remained deliberately visible in contested zones, not as threats but as reminders, their formation precise and disciplined, demonstrating control rather than aggression, and this restraint unsettled alien observers more than open hostility ever could, because it signaled confidence. And when a breakaway coalition of warlords from the Shattered Dominion attempted to reclaim relevance through terror raids on neutral systems, humans responded within hours, intercepting the attackers with minimal force, disabling ships rather than destroying them, and broadcasting the encounters across public galactic channels to illustrate both capability and restraint. And this demonstration marked a turning point, as populations across dozens of systems began to view humans not as conquerors, but as stabilizers, a role no one had expected them to assume. And yet behind this visible order, humans continued to expand their hidden strength, activating deep space manufacturing, arrays that could assemble warships far from any planet, eliminating vulnerabilities associated with centralized production, and training command crews to operate under extreme isolation, capable of autonomous decision-making without reliance on constant oversight, a philosophy shaped by humanity's long history of exploration into hostile environments. And when intelligence reports indicated that a powerful ancient empire known for its energy-based weaponry was quietly developing countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize human fleets, Earth's leadership did not rush to confrontation, instead allowing the project to proceed under observation, feeding controlled misinformation through compromised channels, subtly influencing design choices that would later render the system ineffective. And when the Empire finally unveiled its weapon in a test near disputed nebula, human forces were already prepared, deploying adaptive shielding that absorbed and redistributed the energy harmlessly, turning what was meant to be a show of dominance into a humiliating failure witnessed by half the galaxy. And the psychological impact was immediate, as faith in ancient supremacy doctrines eroded further, replaced by an unspoken understanding that humanity operated several steps ahead, not through arrogance but through relentless preparation. And on Earth, leadership councils reviewed these outcomes with measured focus, understanding that every public success increased scrutiny and resentment. And so they invested heavily in internal stability, education, and transparency, ensuring that the human population remained informed, resilient, and united, because history had taught them that empires often collapsed from within long before external threats succeeded. And as new generations of human officers, scientists, and diplomats took their positions, trained under doctrines emphasizing adaptability and ethical restraint, the galaxy began to see that human dominance was not built on fear alone, but on systems designed to endure beyond individual leaders. And when alien scholars attempted to categorize humanity within existing galactic frameworks, they failed repeatedly, because humans did not conform to any single archetype, being at once cautious and aggressive, diplomatic and ruthless when required, compassionate toward civilians yet uncompromising toward threats. And this unpredictability, rooted in a deep understanding of consequence, became one of their most formidable attributes. And as trade routes stabilized under human oversight, piracy declined and interstellar commerce flourished, further legitimizing humanity's role, even as dissent simmered among those who resented the shift. And in quiet moments aboard command vessels drifting between stars, human officers reflected not on victory, but on responsibility, aware that the collapse of alien supremacy had created a vacuum that humanity now occupied, and that maintaining order in a galaxy unaccustomed to restraint backed by overwhelming capability would require constant vigilance, careful judgment, and the willingness to act decisively when lines were crossed, because the hidden strength that carried humanity this far was not merely the power to win wars, but the discipline to decide when not to fight, a lesson learned through centuries of internal struggle and survival. And as signals from unexplored regions hinted at unknown civilizations observing from the shadows, humanity prepared once more, not with fear or bravado, but with a quiet certainty that whatever emerged, they would meet it with the same resolve that had transformed them from an underestimated species into the defining force of a new galactic era. As the galaxy adjusted uneasily to humanity's stabilizing presence, subtle resistance began to take shape among powers that had avoided direct confrontation, not through fleets or open war, but through economic pressure, covert alliances, and ideological campaigns designed to undermine human legitimacy. And Earth's leadership anticipated this shift long before it materialized, having learned from their own history that dominance often invited indirect attacks rather than frontal assaults. And so, human intelligence agencies expanded their scope, embedding analysts within trade networks, monitoring information flows, and identifying manipulation attempts before they could gain traction, while diplomats counter false narratives with verifiable data and consistent behavior rather than rhetoric, allowing trust to build organically among neutral systems. And when a consortium of merchant states attempted to restrict human access to critical resources by manipulating interstellar markets, humans responded not with retaliation, but innovation, accelerating the deployment of self-sustaining extraction platforms in previously inaccessible regions, rendering the embargo ineffective and exposing consortium's vulnerability to dependence. And this pattern repeated itself across multiple domains, as every attempt to corner or pressure humanity was met with a solution that eliminated the leverage entirely, reinforcing the perception that humans did not merely react to challenges but absorbed them and emerged stronger. And during this period, human fleets reduced their visible patrols, a move interpreted by some as overconfidence or fatigue. Yet in reality, it marked the activation of a decentralized defense doctrine, where autonomous task groups operated under broad strategic intent rather than rigid command chains, making human military presence less predictable and more resilient to disruption. And when a radical faction originating from the fringes of former dominion, Space launched a surprise attack on a civilian transit hub to test human response times, they discovered that response was already underway before the first distress signal was fully transmitted, as predictive threat modeling had flagged their preparations weeks earlier, allowing human forces to intercept, neutralize, and capture the attackers with minimal collateral damage. And the subsequent public trial, conducted transparently and broadcast across multiple systems, further cemented humanity's reputation for accountability and restraint, contrasting sharply with the opaque justice systems of older empires. And on Earth, public discourse remained engaged but measured, with leaders openly debating policy and strategy, reinforcing a culture where authority was questioned but unity preserved, a balance that alien observers found baffling yet effective. And as human educational institutions began training specialists specifically for interstellar governance, conflict mediation, and long-term strategic planning, it became evident that humanity was not improvising its role, but institutionalizing it, preparing for centuries rather than campaigns. And when exploratory probes detected anomalous activity beyond known galactic boundaries, suggesting the presence of civilizations that had chosen isolation over expansion, Earth's councils did not dismiss the findings or rush toward contact, instead commissioning extensive studies to assess potential risks, cultural differences, and strategic implications, demonstrating once again a patience that defied alien expectations. And throughout this phase, the concept of hidden strength evolved in the collective consciousness of the galaxy, no longer associated solely with weapons or fleets, but with the depth of human foresight, the redundancy of their systems, and their ability to transform adversity into advantage without spectacle. And even among dissenting factions, a reluctant respect began to emerge, as they recognized that humanity's dominance was not enforced through constant displays of force, but through an environment where escalation consistently favored humans, discouraging conflict through inevitability rather than fear. And as trade expanded, borders stabilized, and formerly contested regions experienced sustained growth under new security frameworks, the galaxy entered an era of uneasy calm, one defined not by the absence of tension, but by the recognition that challenging humanity directly carried consequences too complex and far-reaching to justify. And within this calm, human planners continue refining their doctrines, updating contingency plans, and preparing for scenarios yet unimagined, because they understood that supremacy, once revealed, demanded perpetual maintenance, and that the greatest threat to their position would not come from an external enemy alone, but from complacency, a lesson humanity refused to forget as it looked toward a future filled with both promise and unknown dangers. The uneasy calm that followed humanity's consolidation of influence did not go unnoticed beyond the mapped regions of known space, and signals once dismissed as background noise or natural anomalies began to form patterns that human analysts recognized as deliberate observation, prompting a shift in long-term strategy as Earth's leadership quietly acknowledged that the collapse of alien supremacy had created ripples far deeper than anticipated. And while older powers focused inward, rebuilding, or resisting decline, humanity looked outward, understanding that history rarely allowed a vacuum to remain unchallenged, and so deep-range sensor arrays were extended beyond conventional limits, crewed by specialists trained to interpret incomplete data and make decisions without certainty, a skill refined during humanity's earliest spacefaring years. And when the first confirmed contact reports arrived describing vessels that did not match any known propulsion signature, hull composition, or energy profile, there was no panic, only intensified analysis and preparation, because humans had learned that fear clouded judgment while curiosity sharpened it, and as these unknown observers maintained distance, human fleets adjusted formation subtly, never aggressive yet unmistakably ready, signaling awareness without invitation. And this quiet exchange continued for months, a silent dialogue conducted through maneuvering, sensor calibration, and restraint, until at last the observers withdrew, leaving behind probes that self-destructed rather than be captured, an act that confirmed intent without hostility. And Earth's councils debated the implications at length, concluding that humanity's emergence had entered a phase where deterrence extended beyond known civilizations. And this realization reinforced the necessity of maintaining hidden strength not just as a safeguard, but as a language understood across cultures. And within known space, remnants of resistance hardened into ideological movements rather than military threats, accusing humanity of rewriting galactic norms to its own advantage. And while these claims gained traction among populations nostalgic for the old order, humans countered not through suppression, but through consistent outcomes, allowing prosperity, security, and transparency to speak louder than accusation. And over time, these movements fractured under the weight of their own contradictions, unable to offer alternatives that matched tangible results. And as interstellar institutions adapted, incorporating human frameworks for crisis response and resource management, the galaxy slowly stabilized around a new equilibrium, one where authority was derived from capability paired with restraint. And during this period, human research divisions completed projects long kept theoretical, advancing fields such as localized space-time control, adaptive biosynthetic interfaces, and autonomous infrastructure that could survive centuries without maintenance. Yet these developments were deliberately underpublicized, deployed incrementally rather than unveiled, preserving strategic ambiguity. And when a coalition of minor powers attempted to test this ambiguity through coordinated incursions along peripheral routes, they encountered defenses that responded proportionally yet decisively, neutralizing threats while preserving avenues for de-escalation, reinforcing the lesson that probing humanity's limits yielded diminishing returns. And among human populations, the concept of supremacy was rarely discussed in triumphant terms, instead framed as stewardship, a responsibility to prevent the kind of unchecked dominance that had once oppressed countless systems. And this mindset influenced training, governance, and policy, embedding caution alongside strength. And as decades passed without large-scale conflict, some alien observers began to believe humanity's edge had dulled, mistaking patience for stagnation, unaware that beneath the surface, human capabilities continued to evolve, layered atop each other in systems designed not for spectacle, but for inevitability. And when historians of multiple species later examined this era, they would note that humanity's true hidden strength during this time was not expansion or conquest, but endurance, the ability to hold a position of overwhelming advantage without succumbing to decay, internal fracture, or overreach. And as new generations grew up under the quiet order humanity helped enforce, the memory of alien supremacy faded into abstraction, replaced by a reality where humans were no longer the unexpected variable but the constant, a presence that shaped decisions even in their absence. And yet, despite this apparent stability, human leaders remained vigilant, because they understood that the universe rewarded preparedness and punished assumption, and somewhere beyond the edges of map space, forces unseen continue to watch, learn, and calculate, just as humanity once had, setting the stage for challenges that would test whether the hidden strength revealed so far was merely a foundation for what was yet to come. The long period of observation from beyond known space eventually gave way to action, not through invasion or overt communication, but through subtle disruptions that human monitoring systems detected almost immediately. As trade lanes experienced precise interference, navigation beacons shifted by fractions that only advanced predictive models could notice, and dormant political tensions across several regions reignited in patterns too synchronized to be natural, confirming to human analysts that an external intelligence was testing responses rather than seeking confrontation, and Earth's leadership convened under strict confidentiality, concluding that this was not a threat meant to overwhelm but to measure, and so they responded with equal subtlety, adjusting logistics, rerouting traffic, and reinforcing vulnerable systems without public announcement, denying observers the reactions they sought. And when further probes attempted to map human command hierarchies through cyber, intrusion, and signal mimicry, they encountered layered decoys and recursive architectures that fed false structures back to the intruders, creating a distorted picture of human organization that would later prove disastrous to those relying on it. And as these exchanges continued, human strategists recognized a familiar pattern, one that mirrored humanity's own early reconnaissance methods from centuries earlier, and this recognition guided their next move, the deliberate exposure of limited capability, allowing minor systems to appear strained while concealed redundancies absorb the actual load, crafting an illusion of vulnerability that would encourage escalation on terms humans controlled. And the gambit worked, as the observing force initiated a coordinated maneuver across multiple border regions, deploying autonomous constructs rather than crewed vessels, likely intending to avoid direct attribution or retaliation, and within moment of confirmation, human countermeasures activated, not as a single response, but as a cascade of localized actions executed independently yet harmonized through quantum coordination, neutralizing the constructs with technologies never publicly demonstrated, systems that rewrote engagement parameters in real time and rendered hostile algorithms inert. And the observers, now exposed, withdrew abruptly, leaving behind debris and data fragments that human scientists analyzed with focused intensity, discovering evidence of a civilization far older than the Triarch's dominion, one that had survived by observing, adapting, and exploiting the weaknesses of rising powers. And this revelation reshaped strategic priorities overnight, because it confirmed that humanity's emergence had crossed a threshold visible even to those who hid from the galaxy itself. And while some advocated immediate pursuit or deterrent strikes, Earth's leadership chose restraint once more, understanding that revealing everything at once would forfeit the advantage humanity had carefully preserved, and instead they adjusted long-term defense doctrines, expanded early warning systems, and quietly elevated readiness across all sectors, ensuring that if the observers returned, they would face a species prepared not just to defend, but to dictate the terms of engagement. And within known space, rumors of the encounter spread despite containment efforts, fueling both fear and admiration, as civilizations realized that humanity was now contending with forces beyond the scope of galactic politics, yet doing so without destabilizing the fragile order they'd helped build. And this balance further reinforced the perception that human supremacy was not reactive but anticipatory, shaped by an understanding that the greatest threats rarely announce themselves openly. And as military academies updated curricula to include scenarios involving adversaries with no known psychology or doctrine, human officers trained not for victory alone, but for uncertainty, a concept deeply embedded in human history. And in quiet moments, leaders reflected on the path that had led them here, from a dismissed species to the benchmark against which all emerging powers would be measured, recognizing that the collapse of alien supremacy had not been an endpoint but beginning. And as preparations continued in silence, humanity stood ready, not with arrogance or fear, but with the confidence born of adaptation, unity, and the knowledge that whatever lay beyond the dark between galaxies, It would encounter species that had already learned how to survive being underestimated, watched, and tested, and that lesson, once learned, could never be unlearned. The observers did return, but not as shadows or probes this time, arriving instead through controlled emergence at the edge of charted space, their vessels vast yet restrained, configured not for immediate conflict but unmistakable presence. And humanity responded with equal clarity, deploying a formation that balanced readiness with restraint, a silent acknowledgement that both sides understood the gravity of first words spoken after centuries of silence. And as communication was established, through layered translation systems refined through years of preparation, it became clear that this ancient civilization had not come to conquer but to confirm. Having witnessed the rise and collapse of countless powers, they had learned to intervene only when a species demonstrated the capacity to reshape the balance of existence itself. And in humanity, they had recognized the convergence of traits rarely sustained together: adaptability without chaos, strength without excess, ambition tempered by restraint. And when they spoke of alien supremacy, it was not with nostalgia or regret, but with clinical observation, noting that every dominant force before humanity had failed the same test, the inability to evolve once supremacy was achieved, and as human representatives listened, they did not claim victory or destiny, instead acknowledging the cost of survival and the discipline required to maintain order without becoming what they had replaced. And this response, more than any display of force, confirmed the observers' conclusions that humanity's hidden strength was not merely revealed through war or strategy, but through self-awareness. And in that moment, the observers withdrew their fleets not in defeat, but in recognition, leaving behind data repositories containing centuries of accumulated knowledge, a gesture reserved only for civilizations deemed capable of enduring the burden of understanding what came before. And as these archives were integrated slowly and responsibly, human leaders ensured transparency, preventing the concentration of power that had destroyed so many predecessors. And across the galaxy, the significance of this encounter spread quietly, altering perceptions more profoundly than any battle ever had, because it confirmed that humanity was no longer reacting to the universe but participating in its long-term stewardship. And former empires, now fully aware that the era of unchecked dominance was over, adapted or faded without resistance, their legacies absorbed into a more stable order. And as centuries passed, humanity did not expand endlessly or rule overtly, instead shaping frameworks that allowed civilizations to rise without repeating the same destructive cycles, guided by lessons learned through hardship rather than ideology. And historians would later write that alien supremacy did not collapse in a single war or revelation, but in the moment humanity proved it could hold overwhelming power without being consumed by it. And as humanity continued its quiet watch among the stars, no longer hidden yet never careless, the universe adjusted to a new constant, a species that revealed its strength not to dominate existence, but to ensure that no civilization would ever again mistake survival for weakness. And in that enduring balance, humanity found its place, not as rulers of the galaxy, but as its most vigilant guardians, shaped by a past of being underestimated and defined by the resolve to never allow that mistake to cost the universe everything again.